Hello, we are ready for chapter 19. It is oiking it down outside, so I'm going to have to a little bit louder, but hopefully that'll be okay. But we've got a skylight just there, so it's just like, but it should be okay. Chapter 19. The next morning, on his way to the House of Bread from the lodging house they were staying in, Mr. Newhart stopped at a little shop to buy some fishing tackle for Freddie and some flowers for his fiancée. News got around very quickly that there had been an engagement, and when the townfolk heard that it was Miss Beloved of the King who was to be married, they were truly overjoyed. Mr. Newhart arrived at the house and knocked at the door, which was flung open by Freddie. "It's fishing time!" he exclaimed excitedly. "I have had my breakfast already. Have you had yours?" Mr. Newhart chuckled. "No, I haven't yet, Freddie. Is there any left?" he smiled. Freddie looked round at the almost empty table. Not really, but I'm sure Grandmother would like to make you some. She's upstairs making the beds." And off he ran upstairs to ask. At that moment, Miss Beloved of the King came in from the back garden. "Oh, hello, my dearest," she said. "How did you sleep?" "Hardly at all," beamed Mr. Newhart. "And you, my darling?" "Not even a little bit," giggled Miss Beloved of the King. "I was too excited," she confessed, blushing a little. "And I," said Mr. Newhart, hugging her and giving her the flowers. "Thank you, Daniel," she said. "They're lovely." And she started looking for a jug to put them in. "I suspect Freddie didn't sleep much last night either. He's so excited about the fishing trip," she said as she arranged the flowers. "So am I," said Mr. Newhart. "I haven't fished for a long time. I hope I remember how," he said, smiling lovingly at the way his wife-to-be looked at the flower arrangement with a critical eye and moved them around until she was satisfied. Freddie came hurrying downstairs. "Mother, Grandmother says, please can you make some breakfast for Mr. Newhart and a picnic for us when we go fishing, please?" "Of course, darling," said his mother, "but Grandmother and I will bring the picnic lunch with us when we join you later." Freddie jumped up and down with excitement. "In that case, please only bring bread, as we will provide the fish, won't we, sir?" he said, beaming up at Mr. Newhart. "You're very confident, laddie," said Mr. Newhart, "but I think we had better have a backup plan, just in case. Maybe some cheese for the bread?" Freddie looked surprised. "Don't you think we're going to catch anything?" he asked, looking a little crestfallen. "Well, I'm going to try my hardest." "So am I," said Mr. Newhart, putting his arm around Freddie's shoulder. "So am I." He sat down to a quick breakfast, with Freddie bombarding him with questions and jumping around in his eagerness to get going, and then they were off. Mr. Newhart blew a kiss to Miss Beloved of the King when Freddie wasn't looking. They came to a lovely spot, deep enough for fishing, but shallow enough that a little boy could safely wade out and set up their tackle. Freddie was very impressed with the new rod and watched carefully while Mr. Newhart taught him how to set things up. The water was cool and clear and sparkled along. The sun was shining, and it was such a lovely day. After some time of quiet, Mr. Newhart spoke. "Freddie." Freddie slightly jumped, as he had been deep in concentration, watching his float and willing it to get pulled suddenly. "Yes, sir?" he said, looking up. "Freddie, I'm not sure how to begin to tell you this, so I'm just going to say it. Please be reassured that I will understand if you have questions, and I will listen to what you have to say." Freddie wore a serious expression. He liked being talked to like he was all grown up, and he read in Mr. Newhart's eyes that this was going to be a very grown-up conversation. "Okay," he said. "Freddie, the fact is that I love your mother, and yesterday she agreed to marry me." Mr. Newhart looked at Freddie. He could see that the boy was surprised and that certain thoughts were rushing through his head, so he continued. "Freddie, that means that I would love for you to call me father too, because I love you like you're my son." Freddie's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, thank you," he sniffed. "I was worried that you were going to take Mother away from me, and I wouldn't have liked that one bit," he confessed. "But I like your plan now very much. I think you will make a very nice father." "Oh," he said suddenly, "does that mean we can go fishing together more?" Mr. Newhart laughed. "Yes, it does, my boy," he chuckled. "And I can teach you about the king and about Prince Emmanuel, and I can teach you how to do all the things I learned to do at your age." Mr. Newhart looked seriously at Freddie. "Does that mean I have your blessing, my son?" Freddie blushed at being called son by this strong, tall, manly man, and he nodded. "Thank you, Freddie," sighed Mr. Newhart. Freddie was quiet for a time, taking everything in, and then he asked, "How soon will I be able to call you father?" "As soon as you like," smiled Mr. Newhart, "for I know your mother would like us to get married this very weekend." "That's very soon," said Freddie excitedly. "Will there be cake?" "Hope so," smiled Mr. Newhart. Just then, Freddie's line tugged, and sure enough, there on the end was a medium-sized fish. Freddie was so excited that he almost lost it in his eagerness to reel it in, but dear Mr. Newhart put his guiding hands over his new son's and helped him gently wind the line until the fish was in shallow enough water to pick up with their net. Freddie was so excited. "Look, father," he said, smiling up at him. "Now we shall have something to go with our bread and cheese." Mr. Newhart smiled. "I think we need a few more still, for Mother will be arriving with Grandmother at the picnic soon." So they got to work. By the time the rest of the party arrived, Mr. Discover the Truth and Mr. Saved by Grace had joined them. Freddie, when he saw them all, ran up to meet them, calling out, "Oh, Mother, Father and I have got ever so many. We will have such a feast." Miss Beloved of the King smiled at her companions. "I think we can safely say Freddie now knows and approves," she said, smiling. The men with Freddie quickly built a little campfire while the women prepared the fish and the rolls, and then what a wonderful smell filled the air as the fish sizzled over the flames. "I do wish the officer could see such a happy band," thought Miss Poor in Spirit as she looked on at her daughter and soon-to-be son-in-law playing happily with Freddie and the other men sitting back while the fish cooked. "Happy indeed," said a jovial voice behind her. "Now are those fish ready?" The officer was smiling down at her. "Dear lady, you have been very blessed," he noted. "Very," agreed Miss Poor in Spirit. Then smiling over the company, she called, "Lunch is ready." "Come and dine," called out the officer. The happy band were delighted to invite the officer to stay and partake of their picnic, and while they ate, he told them wonderful stories of the miracles that Prince Emmanuel had done with fish while he was on this earth. Freddie listened with his eyes wide. He hadn't yet heard the one about the fish with the coin in its mouth, and thought it would be exciting to try and find one too, but as he listened, the officer helped him understand that this was a special miracle for the moment, not something that had just happened. Freddie loved hearing about miracles because he could already see in his little life how the king had performed some for him, the way he had been given a mother and how they had escaped, and now how he had a full family without even really asking for one. Yes, the king was indeed very good. The officer, who knew Freddie's thoughts, looked over at him and whispered, "Very, very good." Freddie looked up and smiled. "So it's true," he said. "You can hear my thoughts too." "Even before you think them," smiled the officer encouragingly. Freddie leant over and gave him a big hug. "Thank you," he sighed. "Thank you for everything." The treasure hunters watched and smiled as Freddie, in his young age, had done what they had wanted to do so often but felt it wouldn't be proper. "And now," smiled the officer, "about this wedding." The grown-ups talked together for a good long time about this, and it has to be said that although Freddie was terribly excited, he did start to get rather bored, so asked if he could go and paddle in the shallows.